what you can do then is you can select your maps that you have on the on your list of maps and then you can click on one of them, and immediately after you complete that map, the map that you have chosen will load. Set resources allows you to modify the resources for the player. Modify resources for players, so you select the player that you want. You can hit then set, which automatically places the number at whatever you put it at. Add, which adds resources, and subtract, which subtract resources. Excuse me. And you can select or gas or both. Set score. This allows you to add the points for the leaderboard and stuff. So like you can add additional points for objectives you do. Same thing with player. Set, add, and subtract. Quantity is the number, so you can say how many. And then points goes back to this again. Remember your score type, which is units, how many units you command. Buildings, how many buildings you command. Units and buildings, how many you command in both. Kills, which shows you how many kills you've got in. Raisings, how many buildings you've destroyed. Kills and raisings, which is both. And then custom, which is pretty much how you customize everything. Your own custom score set. Most of the time you use custom for RPG maps. So you can use this to increase the score. Switch, if you remember how to use switch operators and stuff, this is how you set and this is another thing where you can set and clear switch operators. So remember that one objective that we made earlier where it's only on when a switch set is on? So you can do it to set, which means you turn it on, clear, which you turn it off, toggle, which means it goes off and on whenever you touch this objective, and also if you have a preserved trigger on, and then random means you don't know. It may go on, it may go off, it may stay on, it may stay off. That's how you tell. Talking portrait is used for, like, for example, conversations. What it does is you show a unit portrait. For example, we can have we can have like a Marine talk. Once the Marine starts talking, when the Marine starts talking, we can have let him talk for a certain amount of time. So we have Terra Marine for about 10,000 milliseconds. So we have a talking portrait that goes on for at least 10 seconds. Since we're at the, if you remember this objective that we did right here, this is how to make. This is how a usual talking thing is escalated. You can show Terra Marine talk. You can show Terra Marine talking for about 6,000 seconds, and you can and then you can have this conversation text right here. That's how you do a standard talking. If you need any more help with working with talking, I will talk. You can send me a PM or a comment on the video, and I will just go into everything more in depth. Transmission is a weird one. It's basically like a talking text put all into one thing right away. I can't really talk to you about it too much because I'm not too sure on it. I don't usually use transmissions in any of my maps. I use I just use the regular build up one, put a talking portrait, and then put a text. I'm not really good with setting up transmissions. Unmute unit speech basically removes the muting on a unit speech. If you had set that trigger earlier, then that'll turn it off. On pause the game, if you set a pause game trigger, this turns off that. On pause timer, this unpauses the timer and stuff. The victory trigger basically means that after the objective is met, you have achieved victory. And finally, the wait trigger allows you to set a time frame that occurs in between this trigger and the next, in between one part of the action to the next. For example, I'll show you how to use it because this is actually one of your more vital triggers. Remember this death trigger that shows Terry Ford has been killed? Wow, I have no idea. Wow, I have no idea now where I got that name. Okay, so what happens? All right, what happens first is that it first pauses the game. It displays the text Terry Ford has been killed and plays the comm beep. Then you put a wait trigger that lasts 5,000 milliseconds before the defeat actually comes up. So this separates a 5-second time frame between the defeat scenario and the scenarios right here. And that's what the wait command is. You're going to be using, if you make UMS maps, you're going to be using that a real lot. So you might want to get used to it. Alright. That pretty much covers the triggers. I'm going to go over now the mission briefing. Mission briefing is it's very brief. We won't really there's not too much you need to worry about. And I believe I showed you the tutorial. And alright, we gotta do the mission briefings and we're done. And then I'm done with this, which is good. Alright. When you do a mission briefing, you first of all want to figure out who you are. But if you're going to do, like, for example, if you're doing a UMS map where you have different objectives, each one's going to have a different mission briefing. For us, since it's a one-player map, we're just going to put Dominion Strike Force. So we go to next. As you see, mission briefings, they don't have a condition. They automatically place. You just automatically do the actions. Display speaking portrait. As you remember, the mission briefings, there are usually 4 portrait slots at the beginning. You shoot. These are one of the portrait slots. One from left to right. So 1 to 4 is from left to right. Use 1, 2. Portrait slot 1 is the farthest to the left, and portrait slot 4 is the farthest to the right. Basically, select which portrait you want. And this is basically speaking animation, so it's like the person is talking. So you also use the milliseconds to describe how long you want the animation to go. But you also need a portrait to display there first. So go to Show Portrait. Now this is where you select a unit. So for example, we can choose Arcturus Mengs in slot number 2. We put him to the top. Now when this trigger goes, we'll have Arcturus Mengs in the portrait slot number 2, and he'll be talking for 10 seconds. Mission hide portrait trigger basically is when you're we'll hide a portrait. We'll remove a speaking portrait sometime after you start during the mission briefing. This removes a portrait. So basically, we can have like a wait command that lasts 11,000 milliseconds because of the fact. Separate these two. Then we can hide the portrait, which means Arcturus Mengs' portrait will vanish. Mission objectives, if anyone remembers, there's usually like a mission objective list that is in this corner. This is where you set the objectives. Like for example, and since there's only one objective here, it is 1, destroy the Zerg base. With that objective in, that means that when this starts up, the mission objectives right around here will show up, and it'll just say destroy Zerg base. In addition, when the objectives display right here, they also will appear below when you pause the game and go to mission objectives. That is, they'll also, whatever you set here in the beginning will also appear there. You can change it anytime with the set mission objectives trigger action later in the mission. Play wave is the same thing as it was in the actions. It plays a wave. Show portrait we already went over. Text message is simply a text that you can display how long. For how long. So example, 10,000